Have you ever had someone take something that's clearly yours and just act like it's no big deal? Well, that's exactly what happened to me when a woman, let's just call her Karen, parked her car in my designated parking spot and didn't move it for an entire week. I'm talking 7 full days of me circling the lot, searching for any space, while her shiny SUV sat smugly right where my car was supposed to be. At first, I tried to be polite. Maybe she didn't realize it was my spot. But after a few days of no response, I knew I had to do something. The frustration built up fast, and honestly, it felt like a test of patience I wasn't going to pass quietly. This wasn't just about a parking spot. It was about respect, boundaries, and dealing with someone who acted entitled to whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. Karen seemed to think she could just ignore the rules and everyone around her. You might have heard stories like this before on r/EntitledPeople, but trust me, living through it was a whole different level. The longer she stayed, the more I realized that waiting for her to move wasn't going to happen. I had to get creative, and maybe a little bold. So, after days of planning and watching, I decided to give Karen a very memorable gift. Something that would make sure she never forgot the spot she took, and hopefully think twice before doing it again. What I did next? Let's just say it wasn't your typical passive-aggressive note on a windshield. But as I set my plan in motion, I couldn't help but wonder, how would Karen react when she saw what I did to her car? And would this finally teach her a lesson, or just make things worse? Stick around, because you won't believe how this all unfolded. So here's a bit more background to help you understand just how serious this parking spot drama got. The spot I had was right outside my apartment building, reserved, clearly marked, and something I've had for years. It's not just about convenience, it's a small but important part of my daily routine. Every evening after work, I look forward to pulling into that exact spot, knowing I don't have to hunt for parking or drag groceries too far. It's little things like this that make life easier. But when Karen moved in nearby and started parking in my spot, it felt like she was stepping on my space, literally and figuratively. What made it worse was how she behaved. The first few days, I left polite notes, hoping she'd realize the mistake and move on. No response. Then I tried talking to her in person, but Karen just shrugged me off like I was being unreasonable. She said something about everyone parking wherever they want, as if the rules didn't apply to her. It was frustrating beyond words, and honestly, kind of infuriating. I wasn't dealing with just a misunderstanding. This was pure entitlement. I checked with the building management, hoping they'd step in. They confirmed the spot was mine and said they'd remind her. But days passed, and nothing changed. Karen's car stayed put, blocking me out every single night. I started wondering if she was doing it on purpose, just to annoy me or prove a point. It felt personal. So, I started thinking about how I could get her attention in a way she wouldn't ignore, something that would make her stop and think twice. That's when the idea hit me. Why not make her car look like a present, but one she couldn't just drive away from? I gathered some steel chains, locks, and tools, and spent hours planning the perfect way to wrap up her car. But here's the thing, once I started, I realized this was bigger than just a parking spot fight. It was about standing up for myself without crossing the line, about making sure she couldn't just brush me off again. Still, as I finished wrapping the last chain, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Would she be furious? Would she call the cops? Or worse, would this backfire on me? I had no idea what was coming next, but one thing was certain, this was far from over. After I finished wrapping Karen's car in steel chains, I stepped back and took a deep breath. It looked intense, like some kind of high-security lockup. I knew she wouldn't be able to drive off without noticing right away. But even as I admired my handiwork, a bunch of questions started swirling in my mind. What if Karen reacted in a way I wasn't prepared for? Would she get angry and lash out? Would this escalate beyond a simple parking dispute? Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about how all this tension was affecting the neighborhood. A few neighbors had already started whispering about the car situation, and some even seemed divided. Some thought I was justified. Others felt I was going a little overboard. One of my closest neighbors told me she'd had similar problems with Karen in the past. Apparently, Karen's been known for ignoring rules and acting entitled in the community before. Hearing that made me feel less alone, but also added to the complexity of the situation. It wasn't just me. Karen had a reputation. On the other hand, I started wondering if there was more to Karen's behavior. Was she just careless, or did she have some reason to ignore the spot? I spotted her once, walking by the lot with a stressed look, but she never explained anything when I tried to talk. Could there be something going on in her life that made her act like this? I didn't know, but the thought made me pause for a second. Sometimes people act out when they're dealing with things no one else sees. Despite all this, the main issue was clear. Karen was still parked in my spot, and now her car was literally chained up. I couldn't wait to see her reaction, but I also knew that this could blow up in ways I hadn't planned. The chain wrapping was bold, but it wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message: boundaries matter. As the hours passed, I kept watching from my window, waiting for Karen to come back and discover the gift. I wondered what she'd say, what she'd do next, and how this whole situation might change our lives in ways neither of us expected. The tension was real, and the story was far from over. The next morning, the tension felt thicker than ever. I couldn't focus on anything else. Every sound outside my window had me jumping to see if Karen had arrived. The spot looked so different now, the steel chains gleaming in the sunlight, almost daring her to come face to face with the problem. I kept imagining her reaction, wondering if she'd storm out yelling, or if she'd just stand there frozen, realizing she couldn't ignore this anymore. The uncertainty made my heart race. As the day went on, neighbors started to notice the chains, and I could hear murmurs from their windows and porches. Some people came over to whisper, asking if I'd really done this and whether it was a good idea. A few said I might have gone too far, while others quietly admitted they'd been frustrated by Karen's behavior too. That mix of support and doubt only added to my nerves. Was this the right way to handle it? Or had I pushed things too far? By late afternoon, Karen's car was still there, still locked in chains, and I wondered if she was avoiding coming out altogether. I thought about how long it had been since I saw her last. Maybe she was out of town or simply hiding from the situation. But then I heard footsteps on the sidewalk below, slow but deliberate. My heart pounded as I peeked through the blinds. There she was, Karen, staring at her car with a look I couldn't quite read. There was anger in her eyes, but also something else: shock, frustration. I could tell she was trying to figure out what to do next. She pulled out her phone, probably calling someone, but I couldn't hear who. Maybe the police or a friend to help her get out of this mess. I didn't know, but whatever was happening, it was clear things were about to explode. I debated whether I should go down and talk to her, or stay inside and watch how this played out. The tension was unbearable. Every moment felt like it was building to something huge, and I knew that once Karen took the next step, the entire neighborhood would be watching too. Would she be furious? Would she try to remove the chains herself? Or would this finally force her to respect the rules? All I knew was that things were about to get very intense, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more intense, something unexpected happened. Karen suddenly stepped back from her car and didn't try to call anyone or start digging at the chains. Instead, she pulled out a set of keys from her pocket, keys I hadn't seen before, and unlocked one of the chains. My heart skipped a beat. How did she get those? Was there someone else involved? Had she brought a spare key all along? The mystery deepened. Before I could even process what was happening, Karen's phone rang loudly. She answered it quickly, and her voice dropped into a tone I hadn't heard before, calm but firm. After a few words, she hung up and looked right at me, as if she knew I was watching. Then she said something under her breath, something about making sure I understood the consequences. It sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about parking anymore. It was turning into a full-on showdown. Neighbors peeked out their windows, sensing the tension, whispering about what might come next. Some came down to the parking lot, curious and nervous, as if the whole community was holding its breath. Karen unlocked another chain and stepped closer to the car, but instead of trying to drive away, she did something else. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket and stuck it on the windshield. I squinted to read it. Parking spot dispute will be resolved legally. Do not touch my property. The whole situation became a tense standoff. Me watching her carefully, neighbors watching us both, and that looming question: what would happen if this turned into a legal battle? Would my gift backfire completely? Or was this exactly the push Karen needed to finally respect the boundaries? Either way, the parking spot war had just entered a whole new, unpredictable phase, and I wasn't sure how I was going to handle what came next. As the tension hit its peak, I knew I had to face Karen directly before things spiraled out of control. Taking a deep breath, I stepped outside and approached her, trying to keep my voice calm. Look, I don't want this to turn into a bigger problem. That spot is mine, and I've had it assigned for years. I just want some respect and for you to move your car. Karen looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, she sighed and nodded. You're right, she said quietly. I've been dealing with a lot lately, and I guess I didn't think about how this would affect you. She reached into her pocket again and pulled out a letter, an official notice from the apartment management explaining a recent mix-up with parking assignments. Apparently, there had been a clerical error, and Karen had believed that spot was hers. Hearing this, everything suddenly made sense. Her entitlement wasn't just arrogance. It was confusion and frustration mixed with personal stress. We both stood there, the chain still wrapped around her car, symbolizing the tension between us. Karen took out her keys and started unlocking the chains, her hands shaking slightly. But just as the last lock clicked open, a neighbor came rushing over with surprising news. The management had decided to assign her a different spot nearby, resolving the confusion officially. Relief washed over both of us. What had started as a week-long battle over a parking spot was finally coming to an end. Yet, as Karen prepared to drive away, she turned back to me and said, "I'm sorry for everything. Maybe we can start fresh." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation lift, but also realizing something important. We'd both learned a lesson about communication and respect. But just when I thought the drama was over, Karen paused, smiled slyly, and said, "By the way, watch your mirrors tomorrow. You might find a little surprise waiting." My heart skipped again, wondering what this meant. After all this, it seemed the parking spot war wasn't quite finished. The next morning, I wasn't sure what to expect. After all the tension and surprises, I half expected another round of drama. But when I stepped outside and checked my car, I saw something that made me smile. A small, neatly wrapped box tied to my side mirror with a bright red ribbon. Inside was a simple note: "Thanks for standing your ground. Let's keep the peace." It wasn't just a gift, it was an olive branch. Karen had turned what started as a heated battle into a chance for understanding. That little gesture said more than words ever could. It showed that even in the messiest conflicts, like a week-long parking spot war, you can find a way to move forward with respect and maybe even a little kindness. From that day on, things between us changed. Karen kept to her new spot, and I didn't have to circle the lot hunting for parking anymore. We exchanged nods and small hellos, no longer strangers but neighbors who had been through a tough test of patience and boundaries. The whole experience taught me that sometimes standing up for yourself isn't about confrontation, but about clear communication and setting limits. And sometimes, people just need a moment to see things from a different perspective. Looking back, the whole ordeal was frustrating, sure, but it was also a reminder that everyone has their own struggles, even those who seem entitled at first glance. So next time someone parks in your spot or crosses a line, maybe try to understand where they're coming from before jumping to conclusions. Thanks for sticking with this story. If you've ever dealt with a Karen or had a crazy neighbor situation, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from us/entitled people. Until next time, keep your cool, and maybe keep a set of chains handy just in case.